All right, let's go to the Fuentes stuff. Let me see. So Jim Goad wrote this article, and I may just play the audio version. He wrote this article, and I'll play Fuentes' part, which I haven't seen, but I got it. I got it queued up. He wrote this article, and Fuentes took it as a personal attack, and it wasn't. Jim Goad's been talking about this stuff, I don't know, for decades now. So he wrote an article titled "Rich Snobs versus Poor Slobs," and the schism between racist, quote unquote, whites. And he's been talking about this stuff forever. And I guess Fuentes just assumed he was talking about him, which he wasn't at all. He hates Fuentes, though. Yeah, I mean, but he wasn't talking about him here. I know he's not a fan, but that wasn't who he was actually talking about. And I think this might be him reading the article.
Rich snobs versus poor slobs. The schism between racist whites. In a 2015 article, John Darbyshire drew a distinction between good whites and bad whites. The good whites were the well-meaning anti-racist white liberals, whereas the bad whites were those who dared to differ with modern egalitarian orthodoxies.
Let me see if this will work to make it louder. Sound Fixer works sometimes and sometimes doesn't.
Everyone in Derb's dichotomy was white, and no mention was made of the often stark class differences among them. Both Donald Trump and Alabama trailer park dwellers could be bad whites. The distinction was strictly drawn along ideological lines. Darbyshire called the good white, bad white schism a cold civil war. For now, I'm going to ignore the good whites. I see white liberalism as mostly a reaction to post-World War II economic comfort in a country that was, until very recently, so overwhelmingly white that other differences came into sharper focus. Now, with rampaging anti-whiteness, demographics tilting heavily against whites, and an economy that may collapse before I even finish pecking out this article, the conditions that allowed for good whites to prosper are rapidly vanishing. White liberalism is an ephemeral phenomenon that will evaporate once the cushy conditions that allowed it to exist in the first place have vanished. Whether they like it or not, the white shitlibs will be forced to accept that they are stuck being white. But there's a different, if almost entirely unacknowledged, cold civil war brewing among the bad whites, one I'll characterize as rich snobs versus poor slobs. The current elites openly mock poor whites, as do huge swaths of the current dissident movement. So dissidents are, consciously or not, walking in lockstep with the elites by trampling on white trash. Politically active rich white snobs have spent decades holding their noses and distancing themselves from the optically undesirable Klansmen and skinheads and snaggle-toothed trailer park dwellers. They act as openly disgusted at the very thought of poor whites, especially rural and southern ones, as do rich urban Jews and white liberals. Why? It's almost as if they're unconsciously taking cues from the good whites and good Jews. How much of the rich white snobs' optics-obsessed shitting upon low-class whites is simple strategic marketing, and how much of it is class-based disdain?
I wonder why Fuentes took this personally.
That blinds them to the fact that the poor white slobs are their racial kinsmen. Wikipedia's list of ethnic groups in the United States by household income tallies 73 total ethnic groups. Although Jews are not listed as an ethnic group, Appalachians are. And at number 73, they fall at the absolute bottom of the list, behind even Haitians and Ethiopians. And, just like the good whites and good Jews do, the white snobs can only cackle at the white slobs and say, ha ha ha, fuck you, you deserve it. For the good whites and good Jews, it's, you deserve it because you were too dumb to take advantage of your white privilege. For the white snobs, it's, you deserve it because God made you inferior to me. These oddball, modern-day, suited-up, right-wing e-Christians openly despise wages and white trash losers, regardless of everything their purported savior allegedly said about helping the poor. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see this kind of snobbery toward their own kind in any other race. It's something that only happens among white people. What happened to the idea of no more brother wars? The snootiest black academic or richest black entertainer never looks down on black crackheads. Neither do I see super powerful billionaire atheist Jews heaping scorn on destitute Orthodox Hebes living 22 a
It's not actually about Nick, but I mean, it fits him well.
In some Eastern European shtetl. And yet blacks and Jews seem far more united than white people are. Funny how that works. Can you name an elite movement currently in power that makes a habit of openly mocking poor blacks as losers? Can you point to one billionaire Manhattan Jew who displays seething revulsion for dirt-poor Orthodox Hasidic communities just northwest of Manhattan? White-on-white snobbery is such an obvious divide-and-conquer tactic, I'm perplexed as to why so many people seem utterly blind to it. For those who wonder why the white identity movement seems to be crawling along as slowly as a brick of cheese through a lazy colon, if it's moving at all, allow me to suggest that it's because the rich snobs and the poor slobs have been unwittingly played against one another. The powers that be simply won't allow white racists of all economic classes to unite, so it's in their interests to stir resentment between them. Or maybe you think it's just a coincidence that the modern establishment, left and right, are hyper-focused on the culture war, but hardly ever mention economics anymore? So the question is, do white snobs care about white people, or only the rich ones? If it's the latter, what do they think are the chances of their movement, which in demographic terms is the size of a shrunken head, ever reaching its goals? Who's going to be welcome in their long-delayed ethno-state? All whites, or just the ones they handpick? Do they ever pause to consider that they may end up like the spinster who was a choosy debutante, but wound up bitterly alone? Furthermore, why do the white snobs even care about white demographic decline? They can easily jet off to some secluded enclave that won't be stained by diversity for another generation or two. The ones who've always had to deal face first with diversity's downsides are the poor and working whites. They're the ones whose jobs were shipped overseas while blacks and browns and yellows crowded their neighborhoods. The poor slobs have to deal with diversity in real life, rather than in theory. For the rich snobs, is it nothing more than a mildly exciting video game? If they are genuinely concerned about white demographics...
Well, he told me it wasn't about Fuentes. So, I mean, chat can make up their own mind. But that was direct from the source. So, I mean, you can believe him or not, but...
gain by shitting upon a group that cranks out far more white children than they do. I've always existed as sort of a racial, economic, tragic mulatto.
And he's got an article today that's definitely about Fuentes, and we'll play that, but I'm going to go through this, and then Fuentes does a bunch on it, and I haven't seen that, and we'll play that, and then we'll play what he said today, Jim Goad.
In the opening editorial to the first issue of my self-published magazine, Answer Me, I described myself as white trash with brains. I recently reconnected with someone who grew up a few doors from me on the same block where I did, and he said, "You were always too smart for our working class neighborhood." So I've always had one foot in each world but nowhere to call home. Too smart for my working class neighborhood, yet too working class in experience and temperament to mesh comfortably with academics or, for that matter, anyone who emerged from the middle class or higher. In my 1997 book, The Redneck Manifesto, which focused more on class than on race, I drew a sharp line between white trash and white cash. Back then, most anti-white slurs seemed to focus on rednecks and hillbillies, terms which were both racial and class-oriented. Since then, the scope of relentless anti-white defamation has expanded to include all whites, but especially everyone who dares to be unapologetically white. First, they came for the hillbillies, but even though the upper-crust whites are now also in the crosshairs, they still seem to think it's prudent to shit on hillbillies just like everyone else does. I spent the first part of my adulthood trying to prove to white leftists that I came from a working-class neighborhood, because they believed in universal white privilege and refused to concede that any white person could be deprived in any way. Rich kid white leftists used to say it was impossible for me not to have grown up under comfy, cozy circumstances. These days, I have rich kid white rightists saying that I'm low-class, undesirable genetic garbage for having grown up in a rough, working-class home. What the rich leftist good whites and the rich rightist white snobs have in common is the condescending idea that if I still have to work hard to avoid poverty or homelessness, in other words, if I'm a poor white slob, it's all my fault. One side blames white privilege, and the other blames my genes, but I wind up getting blamed either way. Regardless of their political orientation, you just can't win with these sheltered white assholes. Sure, the decisions one makes in life are important. What's hardly ever discussed is that for most people, many decisions are made for them and are entirely out of their control. Even people who actually have to work for a living, like I will probably have to do until the day I die, sometimes tend to get so immersed in philosophical abstractions about how hierarchy is sacred that they may overlook how thoroughly fucked most of us are for the rest of our lives due to economic decisions that were made without our consent. If you're going to be an elitist, at least be consistent about it. At least follow your elitism to its logical end. It's tacky to worship hierarchy right up to the point where Jews and Asians come out on top, but then you start whining just like you accuse the white slobs of whining about the rich. The problem with one-size-fits-all ideologues is that life is far too complex.
Great
to
point,
reduce
by
to
the way.
simple binaries. Sure, race and genetics account for a lot, but only a sheltered monomaniac would think they explain everything. Being responsible is important, but it's hard to pull yourself up by the bootstraps when the boot factory was offshore to the Philippines. It's not all nature, and it's not all nurture. What I've been saying for decades now is that the aggressive anti-racism push they've been clobbering us with has very little to do with elites being racially tolerant and very much to do with globalizing the workforce and keeping workers distracted with Tower of Babel level squabbles. At least for the past few generations, white privilege has obviously been a lie, but being born into good economic circumstances gives you a tremendous advantage over those who weren't. There was a viral animated video a few years ago about white privilege that showed life as basically a long-distance track and field race where blacks started off far behind whites and were thus disadvantaged. The video was deservedly mocked, not only because it presumed whiteness is anything but a liability on the current playing field, but also since it presumed that whites are a monolith and that they all start the contest from the same point. But the fact remains that if you start out in life with a wealthy family with tremendous networks of support, you are ridiculously privileged compared to someone who had to scrape for everything they got.
Yes.
This is something that racist whites need to talk about, especially if you actually want to form a broad-based white identity movement or, in the long run, an ethno-state. Sure, welfare can demoralize people, but so can trust funds. The most aimlessly fucked up people I've ever known were taking some kind of handout, whether from the government or from their parents. The white snobs are hilariously blind to the specter of fey, spoiled, sheltered, digitally raised accelerationist midgets talking about how poor white slobs, rather than rich white snobs, wouldn't
Okay, that does sound like about Fuentes, but
have survived in primitive societies. Trust me, if things fall apart, it's the white snobs who will be picked clean to the bone before the lunch bell rings. The white slobs will be swinging wooden clubs and cracking heads long after the sun sets. I've known far too many inept, effete, lazy, and flat-out dumb white snobs for the eugenic argument to be foolproof. It's not exactly an accomplishment to have had it easy. Not everyone comes to wealth through hard work and talent. Sometimes it's acquired by treachery, and other times by pure luck. White snobs will admit that environment may negatively affect outcomes if you're talking about degeneracy or single-parent households, but not if you're born poor or at any point in your life find yourself with the bleak choice of either having to work at some soul-crushing job or being homeless. In that case, the blame lies squarely on your shitty genes, and you deserve everything that happens to you. Either we're all in this together, or we're not.
yeah, it is a good piece.
Refusing to acknowledge that poor and working-class whites have been cannon fodder for the globalist diversity project is such a basic bitch libertarian Chamber of Commerce Republican take. I'm surprised that such people can call themselves dissidents without vomiting blood. What do you call people who blame a simple inborn lack of gumption for all the alienation, anomie, addiction, and suicide that has resulted from lower-class whites being fed for generations to the global meat grinder like so many useless corpses to make Soylent Green crackers? In the old days, they would have been called race traitors.
Now that
Rich
was
snob.
excellent, I have to say. And Chief Steph said he might not be talking about. He told me he wasn't. I mean, the what he's saying fits a lot of different people. But I wonder why Fuentes took it so personally. And we have that clip too, and I went and found it myself actually. What? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Now I'd seen part of Jim Goad's response to this, which we haven't played yet. And so I knew that Fuentes had talked about it a show or two ago. So I went through, skimmed through, and found it on my own. Now, apparently he talks about this for a bit. I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. But let's start it right now.
But not too much else going on. Kind of a slow day. The other thing, yeah, you know what it is? The one thing that did happen today is I'm preparing for the show, and that's why I was
So
a
it
little
got
bit late.
picked
I
up.
was gonna be
That article got picked up and reposted on Un's review, and that's how Fuentes saw it, I guess.
here 10 o'clock sharp, but then I got totally sidetracked because I go on Un's review and I'm scrolling through the articles and I see Jim Goad, who is sort of like one of my old enemies. He wrote an article about this Oliver Anthony thing. Yeah, we're doing this again.
By the way, he didn't talk about Oliver Anthony at all during the whole article, but
No, but not really. So he does this article about Oliver Anthony and all this. And basically the whole article is just a screed against me. Because him and I had beef years ago. And I guess he never let it go. So.
Well, no, everything he said is 100% true. And it basically is some regurgitated Chamber of Commerce talking point when you say shit like that. You might as well just be any other cookie cutter Republican faggot on Fox News saying that shit. And, you know, that's one of Fuentes' main. I don't give a fuck about Republican dogma or the Republican Party or their bullshit talking points and their tax cuts and all this trash. Although, you know, tax cuts not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. But no, I hold that with just absolute disdain.
I skimmed his article and it's just loaded up with these implicit references to me and my show and what I've been saying about poor people and so on. And sure enough, I do command find on my computer and there's like 20 mentions of my name in the comments. Everybody else, so it's not just me. Everybody recognized it was basically the piece was a subtweet about me. And I know none of you know who this guy is. He's like a total failure and loser. He was a popular writer, I think, at one point. And there are some prominent people that are fans of his. Tucker Carlson's a fan, and Jared Taylor, and I think Brimelow likes him. And this is the only thing I'm going to say, because I know we're kind of dwelling on the subject a lot, but I think it's a really important point to make. And, you know, I seem to be the only one saying this. I don't know that there are any other people that have been as strong in their condemnation of this culture as me since this stupid song came out.
Yes, there's been plenty.
And started this debate. Really, I think I started the debate, though. And anyway, so the article is doing the usual stuff. It says, oh, you know, the poor white people, we can't blame them because they are victims. The poor white people who we would be
well, Goad is far more accomplished than Fuentes. I mean, but also, I don't know if people know this. It's harder to write a book than it is to go on stream. And I'm on stream. I do that for a living. But it's a lot harder to write a thoughtful book with poignant language and passages than it is to just go and run your mouth. And it'll always be that way. It'll always be that way.
Or as white trash, as they're called, he says, well, they're victims of circumstance, and poverty made them that way. And we are just too sheltered and insulated, you know, the so-called white snobs who look down on the wignats or skinheads or whoever. Oh, well, we just don't get it, and we all need to be on the same page, and it's holding us back because we've been divided, and only white people hate their own, unlike any other group, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, case in fucking point, look at the author of the article. The guy is literally a spiteful mutant. Like, he looks like one. And
what do you look
if you know
like,
anything
nigga?
about this writer who I did an episode of the Weekly Sweat with Beardson, and we had this guy on and we roasted him, the writer here, Jim Goad, and we found out that the guy's like a freak. He was married to some stripper, and then they had an ugly divorce, and he beat the shit out of her, and he married some Jew, and he went to jail for beating her up, and he told the cops he liked it, and then it comes out that he had sex with some black guy when
he lived. I can't go on the second part where
he was a kid, and the guy's like a militant atheist, and he's one of these
he's not an atheist apparently, but
Gen X punk rockers, these insufferable Gen X punk rockers that still in their 60s can't get over how fucking cool they are with their Converse and jeans. It's like you're 60 years old and they still think they're cool because they use profanity or because they have sex. Really? They still can't get over how cool they are. You know, they're not like their fuddy-duddy parents. They swear. They're edgy. You know, these guys are out there. They don't give a flip about the rules. They're wearing jeans. And anyway, like I
By the
said,
way, this guy's got on shorts underneath that suit. He's not even in a full suit.
Case in point. And I said it on Telegram before I started the show. Here's a perfect example of a guy who I believe has money. I don't know, though. But he probably could have money, even if he doesn't. Obviously gifted, obviously a good writer, and intelligent, connected.
Okay. All right. Wow, he sounds great.
Had opportunities, and yet, unlike many other people, clearly succumbed to circumstance rather than overcoming it. And what I mean by that is there are many examples. You look at some of the most successful people in the world today, some of the most successful white men, and they're probably the majority of them have a story about how they came from poverty, parents were abusive, they underwent some hardship. That is probably true of at least half or maybe the majority. It's a good percentage. When you go and you read into any of the most successful people, or you watch 60 Minutes about them.
Yeah, I would never wear shorts. I have shorts on now, but you don't hear me sitting here, talking this bullshit, right? Like, I mean, yes, I do have shorts on. I mean, I'm in Mexico. Sometimes I do have, longer attire, but yes, I do have shorts on actually. Powerchat.live/The Ralph Retort, Killstream.live/tip, Checky.com/Killstream/pay me, $sign Sunset Squad, Rumble Rants. One just came in from Handsome Crayon. He said, "Good morning, Ralph." Good morning to you. He's in Australia. We'll see if we can hit the goal today. I lowered it a little bit because we started early, so it's a little $50 lower. Big support yesterday as well on my birthday. I want to thank everybody for that once again. Meant a lot to me. I really enjoyed the show yesterday. Back out here again today. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm thinking about doing some weekend work because I'm going to have to take Monday off, and I'll probably have to take part of Tuesday off. But I'm going to try to schedule something on Tuesday later so I don't miss the whole day. But we'll see. I'm going to definitely do at least one day this weekend. And it won't be Saturday during the day, but I might do something Saturday night. I don't know. We'll see.
It's always a story like that. It's always, they're battling demons from childhood and the dark shadow. How about this fighter?
Shut up, Austin, you faggot. I'll move on from you in the chat, motherfucker. I'll say whatever I want on my fucking show. That's why I host the show and you sit in the chat. So you move on. You're about to move on from talking in my fucking chat. Is where you're about to move on to, faggot. So I've seen you say some shit out of pocket before, so it's only going to take one more of those till I dismiss you to the fucking nether realm, motherfucker. So shut your fucking mouth, and that'll be the last time I tell you.
On the championship recently, this UFC fighter, Strickland, and his background and everything. So there's many stories like this, and what all the successful people have in common, whether they started rich or poor, whether they had good parents or bad parents, is they didn't accept their lot. And they took their ability, and they worked hard, and they...
You're about to bring out the old me that hasn't been here for a few weeks. But you know what? That motherfucker is still around, and he can definitely make an appearance. He's not off the map. He's just chilling over to the side. And yeah, every day's my birthday. That's right, Cartman. Yeah, yesterday was your birthday. Well, first off, people were saying it and talking about it. I didn't just bring it up out of nowhere. I was the one who said, well, today's just another day. It's not my birthday today. I know that. Some other people are like, missed your birthday. Happy birthday. Da, da, da. That's why I brought it up. It wasn't me. Oh, let's make it my birthday 2 days in a row. That wasn't what I said. Matter of fact, I said exactly the opposite. He's a good chatter, though. I shouldn't go so hard on him, but... Handsome Crayon says, you should do a Sunday show, Ralph. It's Monday in Australia and there's no other streams. Yeah, I think I am. And I may even do a Saturday night, too, because I'm going to have to miss all of Monday, most likely. And then I can't do immigration on Monday because I have some an appointment and stuff that I got to keep. So I can't go to the immigration on Monday, but I can go on Tuesday. And he's got some other clients and other stuff, so Tuesday works better for him. And I'll have to get it. I'll have to do it anyway, so I might as well do it Tuesday.
They overcame what should have been their destiny. And then you look at a guy like this, who, again, is clearly above average intelligence, although I think that's about it, is above average. with an aptitude for writing. I think he thinks he's a lot more intelligent than he really is, clearly above average, not really exceeding that, but with an aptitude for writing. And here's a guy who, the little I know about his background, maybe could have had some degree of mainstream success or something. And although he wants to write and say that we should feel pity or sympathy for the plight of the rural
Well, you
whites
say
or
you're trying to
Appalachia-
build a pro-white movement and a pan-white movement right across all the classes. Well, you can't do that by being a classist and being dismissive of poor whites, right? Like, that's not how you do that. It's just not politically prudent. So that's the problem.
whites or so-called white trash or something because they were destined for this by circumstance, by the system, by the economy. Here's a guy that, for no reason other than his own bad decisions, wound up a resentful, seething old guy that nobody's ever heard of.
Well, plenty of people
Here's
have
a guy
heard
who's
of him.
60. Other people that are 60 are millionaires, famous. They have leveraged the time that they have had on the earth, their talents, their network, the most booming economy in the history of the world, and they made something of themselves. And here's a guy that, despite having the ingredients, and despite even having a start, you could see self-sabotage and blew it up, and would be, and by the way, found himself more content on the outside looking in at his destination, his destined destination, his arrival point, which is born a loser.
My
die a
arrival's
loser,
imminent.
and more content with that so that he can snicker and sneer from the bottom of the ladder. And that's the mentality which is so poisonous that I'm talking about. I don't want people that lose in life and then say, well, it's a tough racket. It's a cold world out there.
Well, it is.
We want people that are going to win no matter what, or fail trying. And I have so much more respect for a person that
It's just not good politics. You're right, Tony, and that's what I was saying. Whether he even actually believes this, which he seems to, it's not politically advantageous when you're trying to attract whites to your movement to shit on the lower class, right? And Goad is, Chief of Staff said this too. Goad's got money, and he's very established. I don't even know where this is coming from, but
trying than someone that never tried at all, or somebody that was constantly feeling sorry for themselves or justifying or excusing bad decisions or mediocrity. That's the problem. And so it was pretty incredible because, like I said, I read this article and I think he was expressing a lot of the sentiment that I hear from people that are critical of me and what I've been saying.
Yeah, he's on Censor.tv too.
Unlike the many people that have been critical that are anonymous or, we don't know who they are, this guy, by giving a voice to it, also provided a face to it and is the crystal clear example of what I'm talking about. Where is that resentment? Where is that critique coming from? It's coming from spiteful, resentful losers. And they're not losers because they don't have. They're not losers because they're genetically weak, because they're dumb necessarily or weak or small or something. They're losers because in their mind, they're content with the loss. And there's almost this sense of relief that they get to say, yeah, well, I didn't quite cut it, but that's because the system's rigged. So I don't have those pressures of having gone through trial. I don't have the pressures of being successful because I'm perfectly content to not have, but excuse it and compensate for it by saying, well, but because it wasn't fair. And here's the big picture.
By the way,
are being...
some of these people don't have the tools. So what he's saying is not true either. I mean, some people do and fall and, have the capability of pulling themselves up, but didn't for whatever reason. Well, a lot of people don't and just stay down. And it's not necessarily because they had gifts that they wasted or talents that they wasted. They just are held down by the structure. And so this thing doesn't even
genocided on a global scale. That's the big picture. For those that
yes,
are
he's doing the bootstrap thing. He's doing the Chamber of Commerce thing, and it's annoying as fuck.
It's that whites are being genocided everywhere they exist. Everywhere where whites have settlements, permanent settlements, they are being infiltrated by nefarious actors, Jews, or treacherous whites. and being allowed then to be invaded by non-whites with a higher birth rate and more barbarous and bold and all the rest. And in 1 century, we are going to be a small minority of the global population and within all of our own countries. And we will be subject to apartheid, second-class status everywhere we exist. That's what's going on.
Well, isn't that all the more reason to get these people on your side and help lift them up yourself with your rhetoric instead of putting them down? Yes, he's Mexican. That's true. But
and here's the point. If whites are going to survive as a diminished and smaller and fledgling group, that's the bright side of our fate in this century, of our possible fortunes in the next 100 years. If we're going to have that, it's going to be comprised of leaders within our race who refuse to lose, who refuse to take no for an answer and say that we will survive by any means, whatever we have to do. Failure is not an option. And it is so poisonous to our prospects of achieving even that grim scenario when you have white people saying, it's okay if we lose because the world
that's not what he said during the...
isn't fair. It's okay. We can be content and we should excuse and we should be pitiable towards losers because the world's not fair or because of the economy or because of the rich or because life's not fair. It's not fair, and we were set up to fail, and we are screwed in many ways, and everything arrayed against us appears to be insurmountable. I don't know about you, but nevertheless, defeat is not an option, and we need imaginative, ambitious people that have that kind of indomitable will. And anything other than that is a cancer that has to be destroyed. Anything other than that is just straight poison in our veins. To get an ounce of that in your head, that we can look at ourselves.
That's what he has on, James. He says, I just pictured him in suburban gym shorts under the desk. Well, yeah. And how I know that is because he had Louis Theroux in his house. And then he stands up and he's got the shorts on or whatever. Like some Nike shorts or some shit.
And feel pity. And start to feel sorry for ourselves and let the standards drop and throw our arms up in resignation and say, so what if we're a bunch of beer guzzling, we're wearing ratty clothes and we're illiterate and stupid and docile. So what? We can't blame ourselves. It wasn't our fault. It was our parents. It was the government. It was the economy. You start to get an ounce of that in your head, and it's going to prevent us from having any kind of success with what we're up against. I've always said that. I just don't even want to hear that. Whenever
Nicholas, yeah, that's right. Yeah, handouts for blacks and bootstraps for whites. I saw that in chat earlier, too. Is he wearing a wig? Austin said. I think he might be. I don't know. It's speculated, but...
anybody starts to make excuses for our people as a group, and people start to blackpill, and they start to say things like, are we going to win? Is it even possible? Oh, it's not worth it. This sort of thing.
He didn't say
I just can't hear that. You can't wake up every day and face the odds that we're facing.
Kafer with a big 50 spot in the Rumble Rants. He says, donate. Extendo stream. Let's hit the goal. In Fuentes will own a landscape crew in the next 15 years after all his pyramid schemes crumble. Attaching himself to this age of consent, creepo-ish. Yeah, it is creepo-ish. Goad W. Yeah, I'd have to agree. We haven't heard the response yet. We'll just look pretty fiery.
With any kind of self-pity in your system like that. And I'll also add, by the way, it sounds just like the black people. And, you look at black people in the society today, and it goes without saying, we're not talking about all black people. We're talking about a culture which is very prevalent among blacks today, and many blacks are into this. You look around at blacks in America today, and what are they synonymous with? Like it or don't like it, they're synonymous with indolence, laziness. They don't work hard. They don't do things right. They have no respect for standards. They're not polite. They're inconsiderate. They're indecent. Like that is the stereotype of black people. And that is true. And black people should want to improve. They should want to improve their image. They should want to improve their lot. But when black people are confronted with these stereotypes or generalizations, they get defensive. And they say things like, oh, well, that's because of slavery. Well, that's because of Jim Crow. Well, that's because of redlining. It's because I'm black, ain't it? It's because I got a last name or I got a name that sounds black. And this sort of thing. And we, you know, a lot of like white nationalist types or white supremacist types rightly ridicule that and say, oh, he a good boy. He didn't do nothing wrong. He was getting his life back on track. We rightly ridicule that mentality and say it's your fault. Black outcomes is a consequence of black behavior. But there are many so-called white nationalists that will turn on a dime and with no sense of irony at all, look at the plight of whites when criticized, holes in their shirts and the same sorts of things. That's why you call it wigger. And they'll say, well, but our jobs were offshored. We were born poor. We don't know any better.
Well, they're white advocates, Nick.
With no sense of irony. And that's a problem. And it makes me embarrassed because you look at Jews and
what?
Jews are like, look at them over the last
By the
century.
way, you know, I've been talking big, and I'll get to this later, but I've been talking big about, you know, not a huge Jewish influence here in Mexico. Well, actually, I was reading today the next president of Mexico might actually be a Jew. So I'll just get in and say, of course, I have great respect for the Jewish people and always have. I just want to say that ahead of time for sure.
And
it's a female too.
I have to be honest, it's admirable. As much as I think it's dishonorable, and I think that they worship the devil and so on. When you look at groups like the Mossad and you look at Israel,
rent's going up.
And they did it, and they were a smaller fraction, but they went out there and they said, we will do whatever it takes. We will lie, cheat, steal, kill, terrorism.
She's a J,
I'm not
yes,
saying we should
she
do
is.
that sort of thing. But I'm saying they have this mentality of the survival of our people is non-negotiable. It's for our people. And then I look at the sorry state of whites, and you got this song going on, and I make these comments where it's like, yeah, that's kind of, we want to be like Trump, not like this guy. And people go, oh, you just hate, oh, it's because you just hate whites. You're self-hating. Oh, you think you're better than us, huh? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm hearing black people. Oh my gosh, like, I mean, that's what black people say. Am I going insane? I make this criticism when I hear these whites say.
Well, she's actually, I'm getting ahead of myself in this story. She's actually AMLO's lieutenant and was the mayor of Mexico City. And then before that was a mayor of one of the boroughs of Mexico City. She's further left than AMLO, actually. But great respect for her, of course. But
better than us. You know, you hate white people. You just hate us, huh? Well, we are like this for a reason, and that's white culture. We like our beer. We like our, we like sagging our pants. I'm like, okay, you know what you sound like right now? So I'm going to beat it out of white people. I'm going to metaphorically beat it out of them. We got to get that out. No matter who you are, where you come from, you got to be better. You have to be better. You have to overcome your circumstance. Rich, poor, in the middle. You have to be better than where you started. You can't make excuses for yourself. You got to be clean. You got to be educated, intelligent. You got to be sharp. You got to be successful. And if you're not, then it should not be for lack of trying.
okay, so that's a different message, basically. So encouraging people to do that is not really a bad thing, but denigrating people, like throwing them on the bus, it should be a hopeful message. It should be a positive message, not, oh, this piece of shit, lower class, poor, don't be poor, and this and that. That's what he said there is a totally different message that I'm not really against. But that's not how he usually delivers it, and didn't even deliver it like that in this screed. So, you know, what he says there, I mean, you know, I could sit here and make a bunch of reasons why this, that, and the other happened, and they're not untrue, but, you know, it starts with yourself. I mean, I don't disagree with that, but that's not the same message.
No excuse for any white man in the country.
Yeah, it's not
does
consistent,
have an
Dixie.
excuse.
Respect, that's
I'm
it.
sorry.
He can't
I don't
even keep
wanna
it consistent for 30 seconds.
see another video of white people getting beat up by black people. I don't want to see any more of that. There's no excuse. I don't want to hear people, well, and don't get me wrong, it's not to say that we're disadvantaged. We are. It's not that I don't acknowledge that. But we're white. We're supposed to overcome that. You can't simultaneously claim the heritage of your ancestors, which includes Columbus and Napoleon and Julius Caesar and so on, and at the same time be and settle for mediocrity. You can't do it. So anyway, so I saw that article. It was too perfect. And like I said, that's why, because I wanted to be on time again. I was here at 10. I was here like 10:40 tonight. But I saw this article. I got totally sidetracked. I lost my mind reading that. And of course, he won't even say my name. He's going to, imply.
Well, he did the next one. We're about to listen
he's
to it.
attacking me, which is really noble. But it's
Well, it worked anyway. Even if you think it's about you, you still spoke out about it. So that's pretty smart. Anyway.
It's this insufferable, like, boomer mind poison. We have to be like the generations before the boomers. No excuses. Be a man. It sounds like millennials, Gen Xers, boomers. They all sound the same. It's like, well, but my parents, but the economy. And Zoomers have to be different. Generation Z has to say.
Zoomers are, don't get me started.
To themselves, be a man. Take care of business.
Some Zoomers are good, but.
So that's that. I want to move on. I want to get.
To hold up Zoomers as some type of, like, savior class is ridiculous. Like, extremely ridiculous. ... Yeah, that's true. Sheinbaum is a climate scientist turned politician. I can't believe how over it is. Yeah, she is. I think she's the environmental minister now, or held that post at some point, and was the mayor of Mexico City. I know that because I read that. We'll go through the article here in a minute, but yeah, she's on pace to win the presidency next year, and I guess AMLO might be term limited. I don't know how that works. I think he is. His approval is very high in Mexico. He's like 65%. He's one of the most popular leaders in the world, and she's kind of his heir apparent. So Cartman says they did surveys. Gen Z is statistically the gayest generation ever. Yeah, I believe that. Let's hit the goal. We are how far the way there now? 34%. It's a little bit lower today because I started later, so I took $50 off the goal. So let me do a little stretch, like wings. I went through some wing stuff, unplanned. Powerchat.live/TheRalphRetort, Checkya.com/Killstream/pay me, Killstream.live/tip, $Sunset Squad on Cash App, Killstream.live/entropy, Rumble Rants that K-Fur took advantage of there with a very kind contribution. Also Hyper Chats, but I can't get Odyssey pulled up. So if some of you are watching on Odyssey, shout out to you guys. It won't pull up for me today, and I don't know why, but some problems going on there. We'll listen to Goad's response. I'm tempted to get into some other stuff, but we might as well stay on this and finish it off, polish it off. The Virgin Queen Chihuahua is what Jim Goad calls Fuentes, by the way. The Virgin Queen Chihuahua. And I could just read it myself, but I'd rather hear him read it. So
the Virgin Queen Chihuahua has spoken. Whenever someone hears something that had nothing to do with them and decides to take it very personally, you know you're dealing with a woman on her period. Despite his high-pitched voice and flamingly effeminate mannerisms, the diminutive podcaster Nick Fuentes is probably not a biological woman. He merely acts like one. He took an article I wrote last week straight to his weeping heart and, in a cunty 18-minute act of shrieking vengeance, he made several personal attacks against me. As someone who's known for unapologetically bitch-slapping women who deserve it, allow me to proceed.
We can't support that. Allow me to proceed. All right, proceed, sir. I will allow this procession.
The article that he took very personally was called Rich Snobs versus Poor Slobs, the Schism Among Racist Whites. It was first published on Countercurrents and picked up by the Un's Review. When I woke up yesterday morning, people were messaging me about Fuentes' response to the article. He'd spent a full 18 minutes kvetching about what I'd written, but mostly about me. on his show Tuesday night. He'd also implied that I was somehow afraid to mention him by name.
I go on Un's Review and I'm scrolling through the articles and I see Jim Goad, who is sort of like one of my old enemies. He wrote an article about this Oliver Anthony thing. So he does this article about Oliver Anthony and all this. And basically the whole article is just a screed against me.
You can read the article. I linked to it twice above. This
Article about this Oliver Anthony thing.
didn't mention Oliver Anthony once. I still haven't even heard the song that gained him some temporary notoriety, nor have I mentioned him until now. But the self-absorbed it girl of the waning tradcath movement pivots and says the article wasn't really about Oliver Anthony at all. It was all about him. As should be clear to anyone who actually read the article, I've been talking about the chasm between white trash and white cash since the mid-90s. But leave it to an extremely online, self-absorbed femboy with a high-pitched voice who wasn't even alive in the mid-90s to make it all about him.
I do command find on my computer and there's like 20 mentions of my name in the comments. Everybody else. So it's not just me.
Wow, how did he get Nick to appear for this read-through? Like, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I got to take my non-existent cap off today for Fuentes. I wouldn't expect him to do something like that, but that was really big of him. And it is funny that he literally describes self-absorbed, only online people, and then Fuentes just proves the point for him and goes through and name searches the comments and all this stuff.
Everybody recognized it was basically, the piece was a subtweet about me.
No, you yipping Taco Bell mascot. The article had nothing to do with you. But because you took the article so personally, and since you're such a vain, blushing orchid, you felt the need to lash out against me.
The guy's like a militant atheist, and he's one of these Gen X punk rockers. These insufferable Gen X punk rockers that still in their 60s can't get over how fucking cool they are with their Converse and jeans.
I guess I should take it as a compliment that I come off cool to someone who's always seemed like a pint-sized nerd to me. But I've never claimed to be an atheist, much less a militant one. I've never been a punk rocker. I was born in 1961, which makes me a boomer according to these entirely arbitrary goalposts. As one of these meme-addled, gullible morons who buys into the idiocies of generational astrology, Fuentes couldn't even get that fact straight. The Virgin Queen Chihuahua.
Oh, shout
continues.
out to
And here's a guy who...
D-Live. We got a few bucks over there. I'll add that to the tally. Shout out to... Oh, shit. I fucked it up. What is it? Pitch Rogan? Is that what that said? I don't know if that was this stream or last stream, but I'll look at adding that.
The little I know about his background maybe could have had some degree of mainstream success or something. Here's a guy that for no reason other than his own bad decisions wound up a resentful, seething old guy that nobody's ever heard of.
He's been doing the same high school cheerleader
Yeah, I'm more popular than you
thing for as long as I've been aware of his existence, which is about 6 years. If popularity and wealth were the sole gauges of merit, then Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, and Ben Shapiro, all of whom Fuentes has incessantly whined about, are vastly superior to Nick Fuentes. I realized a long time ago that when people attack you personally, they tend to come blazing at you with things that would hurt them. For example, if someone thinks you'd be mortified if they've revealed embarrassing personal details about you, they're actually signaling that this is a sore spot for them. So the greasy little twink brat apparently thinks the whole
nobody's ever heard of him
thing will bruise me irreparably. In doing so, he's signaling something about himself. More on that in a moment. I guess it never occurred to him that mainstream success was never my aim. If popularity or wealth were ever goals of mine,
That is real.
I obviously would have gone about things differently.
Doompill is right. A lot of time, not every single time, but a lot of times, yeah, it's projection over what you think would hurt yourself. And I can include myself in that on certain occasions. I can sit here and think of some things I've said where it's like, sometimes legitimate, but other times you're projecting what would offend you or what would hurt your feelings and using it as an attack on somebody else, and they might not even care about that thing at all. So
Part of the reason I'm not wealthy or more successful is clearly due to bad decisions I've made in my personal life. I wrote a whole book about it.
See,
Another reason
I know how that goes. We got to get Jim back on the show. We have too much in common. We have way too much in common. All right, let's play this.
Plainly has always been far more important to me than being popular or successful. I realize this is incomprehensible to a shallow bullshit artist who's addicted to e-fame and money. Yet another part is that I sincerely miscalculated how much the average person values truth. He then goes on to contrast me with other men of my age who are lavishly wealthy.
You look at some of the most successful people in the world today, some of the most successful white men, and probably the majority of them have a story about how they came from poverty. Parents were abusive. They underwent some hardship. That is probably true of at least half, or maybe the majority. It's a good percentage when you go and you read into any of the most successful people, or you watch 60 Minutes about them, or whatever.
Oh, he gets his statistical evidence about how many of the
Most successful people in the world today.
come from poverty and hardship from watching 60 Minutes. Yeah, we're dealing with a real rhetorical wizard here, a downright brainiac.
And although Goad wants to write and say that we should feel pity or sympathy for the plight of the rural whites or Appalachian whites or so-called white trash or something because they were destined for this by circumstance, by the system, by the economy, his article says, oh, you know, the poor white people, we can't blame them because they are victims. And it is so poisonous to our prospects of achieving even that grim scenario when you have white people saying, it's okay if we lose because the world isn't fair. It's okay.
Nowhere in the article did I say anything from which a remotely intelligent or honest person would infer,
it's okay if we lose because the world isn't fair.
I clearly said that white solidarity is impeded by affluent whites shitting repeatedly upon less affluent whites
Yes.
and saying it's all their fault.
Right. And that's what I said too. And Fuentes at the end of his screed, that message is not necessarily bad. Right? Okay, you know what? You got problems. Okay, it's structured against you. All right, well, get past it. Right? Have it on your mind at least to get past it and to overcome and to rise above. That message is not really bad. But that's not his message. And we just played it, was it last week or week before, where he just, pisses all over poor whites and yeah, it's all their fault. And, that's a totally different and negative message. So
Little Nicky, maybe you actually read my article and realized you have no effective retort for it. Maybe you're fundamentally as dishonest as I suspect you are and decided to completely misrepresent what I said. Or maybe you were so busy name-searching yourself in the hundreds of replies to the article, which again never mentioned you or Oliver Anthony, that you didn't even read it. Instead, you distill it all down to misleading sound bites that are digestible to people who are too online and or stupid to grasp anything more complicated. You know, the lonely, barely adolescent virgins who are so historically illiterate that they probably think you invented the slogan, America First. It's easy to see how soft you are, from your chirpy voice that apparently will never deepen to your swishy hand gestures. How absurdly weak and spoiled. How your life has been one giant marshmallow pillow. How a 5-mile-an-hour wind would flatten you. You can also tell how some actual adversity and hardship would crush you like a bug. Jeepers, you've had the indomitable will
what I've said.
to survive being banned on Twitter. Oh, the horror. For all you whine about others whining, it hasn't stopped you from whining about boomers, from whining about Jews, from whining about single moms, from whining about atheists, or from whining about women in general for the fact that you're such a screamingly obvious closet case. Unlike Fuentes, I've actually been with women. I showed my wife, who was entirely unaware of his existence, a short clip of him speaking. I said, "What do you think of this guy?" Without missing a beat, she said, "Gay." So gay.
Gay. Well, this is what I said about Fuentes weeks ago. It's like this guy has had no real adversity. And the shit he calls real adversity is not. Okay, let me go back.
Like his butthole must be this wide. Like the much-missed Davis Orini, he's apparently the only person in the world unaware of how gay he is. About a half-dozen years ago, I had a cordial discussion with Fuentes on my podcast about the boomer meme and how it was stupid. I'd never heard of him until about a week earlier when I saw him call someone a fat boomer faggot on a podcast. But he'd clearly heard about me and had been reading me for years. He didn't strike me as particularly bright and was a complete lightweight at debating, and I easily bested him on every logical point that we discussed. When he posted a link to the discussion on Twitter, he called me brilliant. But in my subsequent interactions with him, he's had to drag about a half dozen guys along with him just to pretend that he's capable of keeping up with me without a cackling cacophony of his doofus sycophants by his side. The only other 2 times I've conversed with him after the initial boomer debate were when he and about a half dozen other Nick suckers shouted over me on 2 successive live streams because I'd defended a white woman after she was raped by a black guy. That was the only reason I went on those streams, but they never seemed to mention that part. These virgin incel oddballs are so twisted about women, such reflexively anti-white Kanye West slurping wiggers, that they took the black rapist's side without knowing any of the facts. And then when it turned out that the white woman's rapist was convicted and sentenced to 25 years based on the DNA evidence that they were certain didn't exist, the members of his all-anonymous boy-groper army sure as hell shut the fuck up about it. That's because they have zero honor. They are the empty and ephemeral effluence of the digital age. Many have pointed out how Fuentes made some clearly insurrectionist statements outside the Capitol on January 6, 2021, such as these.
It appears we are taking the Capitol back from the police right now. Keep marching and don't relent. Never relent. Break down the barriers and disregard the police. This Capitol belongs to us now. These politicians don't represent us. They betray us. And we are forcibly evicting them from the people's house. They must live in fear of the American people who they have betrayed over and over again.
But how odd it is that he emerged with no legal charges, while people who said and or did far less are now in federal prison.
Yes.
Many have accused him of being a federal agent. I try to stay away from Fed accusations because I think they're poisonous and foster a climate of distrust that the federal agents must absolutely love. It's also telling how this wannabe future leader seems to discard those in his inner circle again and again and again. One by one, they all see through the charade and realize you are even further up your own ass than Richard Spencer ever was. If you can't even keep your pizza delivery boys in line, good luck trying to rule the world, Little Caesar. Your whole tradcap shit has lost steam, as most of its influencers have been outed as closet cases, rapists, and pedophiles. Over a year ago, I relished watching you get eviscerated by Mr. Medicare, who has more talent in just one of his cancer cells than you do in your entire shrimpy body. There's a certain level of fame where one refuses interviews with people because they don't have the time or interest. And then there's the point where they pick fights with nobodies because they're on their way down. And that's where Nick Fuentes is after merely a half dozen years in the spotlight. He peaked about 3 years ago. Now he's fading, and fading fast, picking fights with a nobody who wasn't even thinking about him until he did an 18-minute stream about me. Even your armies of online anonymous virgin incel fake cath harassers have dwindled significantly. You're a hollow salesman. You grift off lonely virgins who are as clueless about women as you are. But increasingly, the people aren't buying what you're selling. People are gradually realizing that I was right about you all along. Enjoy your fleeting e-celebrity, little lamb. I'm sure that somewhere, after you're done using the blacklight to search for cum stains from your latest right-hand yes boy, as you bask in your own afterglow, you realize that you've already peaked. Your Cozy.tv streaming site bled nearly 20% of its viewership last month alone. Meanwhile, I've written exactly what I mean for longer than you've been alive. That's my measure of success, one you'll never come close to matching. As the hilarious dead Jew Don Rickles used to say,
you were a big star once, but face it, it's over.
As the morose dead German Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, that which is falling should also be pushed. This is me pushing you.
Damn. Can we get a 1 in the chat if we enjoyed that? I have to put a 1 in there myself because I did very much enjoy that from Mr. Goad. And trying to get him on the show. Hopefully we can set that up soon. I got to talk to him off air first, but I'm streamed so much that I haven't been able to yet. But I did have some correspondence with him, and we had a bit of a falling out, but it's mostly over this faggot Fuentes. And I was like, yeah, I'm obviously not on board with that any longer. So hopefully we can get him. He's been on this Killstream several times already, and I have his book somewhere because he sent them to me. I think they might be in that box over there. But shout out to Jim Goad. Let me pronounce correctly. And I love how they do it on Countercurrents because they have the authors read the articles themselves. And of course, I could have read through it too. I do a lot of read throughs on the show, but it's just better. He's really good at the read through too.
Thank you for watching this clip. This is the CACA. Remember to like and subscribe.